Get gifty this season at Bloomies, a first-of-its-kind, highly edited new concept store in the Mosaic District. You'll find all the best names in fashion for men and women, like Balenciaga, Givenchy, ALC, Ganni, Golden Goose Deluxe brand, On Running, and so many more. Just in time to wrap up your holiday shopping and treat yourself to something incredible. Plus, mention this ad and receive a special gift next time you stop by. See you soon at Bloomies. Offer valid 1 per customer while supplies last.
Welcome. This is Michigan's AutoTalk podcast, episode number 35. I am Phil Tower, producer for this podcast, and we are here with you every week celebrating the automobile, everything automotive, and also about helping and supporting you, the car and truck owners across the great state of Michigan, birthplace of the automotive industry. By the way, big news for our podcast listeners. We are now in the Spotify app. And we're also, of course, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Spreaker.com, and, of course, your Amazon Alexa smart speaker. It is my pleasure on this episode, as I need to do for every episode, to introduce our 2 co-hosts, actual certified automotive technicians. We have Al Schwinkendorf and John Puick from Verberg's Automotive in beautiful Grand Rapids, Michigan. Hello, gentlemen.
Good evening.
Good evening. Well, we have a special guest who has been with us on the podcast before. He's someone that has both a well-known presence in the Detroit area and nationally for CBS Radio. He works at News Radio 950 WWJ, and as Al talked with our guest Jeff Gilbert before we started this episode, Al wants his job, so Jeff, stay close to the microphone. First of all, we've caught up with Jeff Gilbert for this episode. He is in San Diego with some very secretive reporting you will hear on a future episode of the Car Chronicles and somewhere on a CBS News radio station near you. Jeff, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you back.
Sure. Thanks for having me. And I'll let Al know when I'm going to retire. So you'll have first dib. No problem.
You know what? My brother lives in San Diego. I can have him take you out and wine and dine you. He can afford it.
When you said take you out, I was thinking a whole different thing.
Me too.
No, not like that.
Okay, real good.
We're German, not Italian.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, so let's start with the reason we wanted to catch up with you again. And you've joined us in the past, but there was a big event that got a lot of buildup in the media. And that is, of course, General Motors rolled out the red carpet for all of the press. And the president, who made a visit in mid-November, November 17th, to the Detroit area, and this all took place in a massive GM factory, which, as I understand it, Jeff, was essentially a repurposed, retooled factory, now renamed Factory Zero, as GM focuses everything on EVs for the future. Did I get most of it right?
Yeah, you got most of it right. It's called Factory Zero, which is something important in GM nomenclature because one of their original factories was called Factory One. So they decided, now that we're going into an electric future, we want to say this is where it started. This particular factory was known for years as the Detroit Hamtramck plant. It's in the city of Detroit, and it spreads across the border into Hamtramck, which is actually a small city that is surrounded by Detroit. Now, this particular plant had made big cars most recently. It's made a number of vehicles, and it is a huge old-style plant that GM just a couple of years ago said was totally obsolete. It was going to be scrapped. It was, if you recall, GM had a whole list of plants they were going to close. This was first and foremost on that list. Well, fast forward to the UAW negotiations after that, talks between GM, the union, the city of Detroit, and they decided maybe we can retool this plant to make electric vehicles there. Well, it's been retooled for the past 2 years. There are Hummers on the assembly line right now. They'll be followed by an SUV version of the Hummers. Soon we'll see the electric Chevy Silverado pickup that's going to be made there. There's also going to be a self-driving vehicle made there and a lot of other vehicles that GM hasn't announced yet. So GM was all ready to have a big, grand opening, have a lot of employees there, media there, and the White House was so impressed they said, "Can the president come?" And GM said, "Of course." And then they said, "But the president can't make it Tuesday, can you change everything to Wednesday? And they did that. And because the president was there, all of a sudden it went from this big grand opening of the plant to the president's here to tell us how special our plant is. So it is a special plant for GM. It's important. They're getting a lot of attention for it, but the opening was a little bit different than they had planned.
I was told that Hamtramck was actually built for the baby boomers after World War II to go to work for GM. Is that right?
That particular plant was built in the 80s, so I really don't know about the history.
Okay, so that's not the fact.
Yeah, Hamtramck for years was a mostly Polish town. It was where Pope John Paul visited in 1987. It had a very large but aging Polish population, lots of good Polish restaurants there, but in recent years, it's become a lot more diverse, a lot of immigrants from the Middle East, particularly from Bangladesh there.
Interesting.
And it's kind of changed in character, but it's a well-known enclave, as they call it, of Detroit, because it's a town totally surrounded by Detroit. But if you'd have gone there in the 80s, you'd have felt like you were in a little town in Poland.
I come from a long list of auto workers, immigrants mostly. I had a grandfather who went to Detroit, worked for I believe it was Hudson, then moved to South Bend, Indiana, where his relatives were, to work for Studebaker in the interior shop. I have family in Romulus that have been Ford workers for 4 generations and stuff like that. And it's like in Grand Rapids, we have the east side, the west side, the north side, the south side. In Detroit, it's you live here, you work for Ford, you live there, you work for GM, you live in Flint, you work for Pontiac, Oldsmobile. It's crazy. Yeah. And all that's gone away. It's not the same anymore.
Yeah, it's changed quite a bit. I live in Northville, which is a western suburb. Because it's the western part of Wayne County, you do have a ton of Ford people around that area. But I also know some people in my neighborhood who work for other auto companies as well. And of course, people who work for non-automotive operations too.
Integration at its best.
Yep.
Hey, Jeff, I want to ask you about the factory itself. We know it's been retooled. I'm looking at the media fact sheet here. It is a massive building, 4.1 million square feet. The
Wow.
footprint covers 365 acres. But I know you mentioned right now the Hummers, the electric, the EV version of the Hummer is now being manufactured there. So this is a fully up and running plant. It wasn't just a media show and it's still not open yet. Is that where it is right now?
It is up and running, but it's very early in the process. You don't just flip a switch and start making vehicles. You have pre-production models, pilot models, prototypes. Well, prototypes are generally made somewhere else. So they are now making early production models there and slowly gearing up the Hummer pickup truck, and then they're going to add the SUV version after that. Now you mentioned the massive size of that plant. They are not going to be using the entire plant. They haven't used that entire building for years. A lot of it has just been cordoned off because you don't need auto plants that are that big anymore.
That's true. That's a great point. And
now,
not
I
only
got a
that,
question for you. Have you seen this Hummer, electric Hummer?
Oh yeah,
does it resemble something we've seen in the past?
Yeah, the basic look is like what you would expect for Hummer. I mean, Hummer, if you want a brief history there, it started out as a civilian version of the military Humvee.
Right.
The first Hummers were mostly Chevy Tahoes underneath that had a Hummer styling on top.
Like the H2s. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, the H2. I mean, it's funny. I did have a chance to drive the very first Hummer, which was actually made by a different company called AM General.
The H1.
Yep. 7.3. This was even before they called it the H1. This thing was a beast, and it was the only time in all of the test drives I've done that I had kind of a negative pushback from the car company because when I did my review, this vehicle was so loud. I played the sound of the diesel engine drowning out the radio. And somebody at GM didn't take that very well. But
did you do this in Mishawaka?
No, I did it. I did it in Detroit as I was driving the vehicle.
Okay.
And the PR guy was kind of laughing. It was like his boss didn't take it very well, so he called me, and we sort of had a laugh about it. It's like, hey, it sounded interesting when I was having the engine drowning out the radio, so I recorded it and used it in the piece. But it was a cool vehicle. But GM did its variants on that, and then the recession of 2008, 2009, 2010 came, and GM, with high gas prices, couldn't give Hummer away. They tried to give it away to a Chinese firm. It didn't work, so they just wound it down, but they retained the rights to the name, and they decided a couple of years ago to bring back the name as an electric vehicle. So it's actually the GMC Hummer EV for a pickup, and then they'll have an SUV version. So it's instead of a separate brand, it's a model of GMC.
To me, that's hilarious because my significant other has an uncle who is the barber of Rockford, and he drives a H2 Hummer, and it's got a zillion miles on it. He's put 2 engines in it, 3 transmissions and all that. And when people started giving him grief about driving a Hummer, when gas prices went up and we started seeing Toyota Priuses and stuff like that, he went down to the dealership and got one of those emblems that they put on the flex fuel vehicles, and it's got a green leaf and everything else. And he bought them. He spent like $75 buying these things. He put them on his Hummer to tell everybody he was eco-friendly.
Well,
just as a joke.
Very nice of him. But
that's just how he is.
It's funny how the world changes, because back then people thought SUVs were going away. I had stories of people on the West Coast who said when somebody would drive up with a Hummer, people would boo and hiss, which is kind of interesting. But you fast forward to the mid-2010s, and I bet GM regrets getting rid of that brand because Jeep has become so hot, and they would have had something to compete against Jeep. So they've got the name, they brought it back. It truly is green because it's all electric, and it's going to be $100,000 vehicle at first. They'll get the price down with some later models.
It doesn't matter. The people are going to buy them are going to buy them.
Yeah. Right, but it's not going to be big numbers.
Isn't there already a significant waiting list for signing up for the Hummer EVs?
Yeah, I'll give you there is, but I'll give you a little hint into how the auto industry works. I don't think there's ever been a new vehicle that's been released that doesn't have a sizable waiting list, because the car companies are very good at figuring out how many people want to buy these vehicles. So they limit the waiting list to the point where they can say, "Hey, we're sold out." Yep. So you're not going to sell 100,000 Hummer pickups a year. They're not saying how many, but the cool thing about this is it really shows what you can do with an electric vehicle. For years, people thought all EVs were glorified golf carts. Well, this thing could crush your golf cart and just keep going afterwards. It has 1,000 horsepower. It has this mode that they call watts to freedom, and somebody came up with that idea because of what the initials stand for. Just you can work it out in your head, where it's like the ultimate peel out mode. It's got something they call crab walk, so it can go kind of diagonally. It's 4-wheel steering. They pretty much took everything you could possibly do in an EV, put it in this vehicle, so it tells the world what GM is capable of, and then you'll see a smattering of all of this technology in vehicles that real people can actually afford.
I drove home tonight behind a Tesla X, and its license plate says EWWW gas. Ooh, cracked me up.
All right,
very interesting. We're talking with
their finest.
We're talking with CBS News Radio auto analyst Jeff Gilbert. He's joined us on Michigan's Auto Talk podcast. Jeff, I want to also ask you about your role. You are one of the jurors, one of the people who votes for the North American Car of the Year award. This is not the Motor Trend Award, which is easy to get confused. That's been an industry-leading award for decades. But this is the North American Car, Truck, and SUV of the Year awards. By the way, what organization sponsors these awards?
The organization would be North American Car, Truck, and Utility of the Year. We're self-supporting.
Okay.
There are 50 jurors. We're all reporters for different kinds of publications, and this award is basically a consensus among 50 automotive journalists of what the best vehicles of the year are. So we go through all the new vehicles in a year, narrow it down to 3 finalists in each category, and then give out the winner. It used to be at the beginning of the North American International Auto Show. Now it's early January, about the time the auto show would have been. So I think January 11th is the actual award presentation this year.
Is it totally up to you, or do you have criteria that you go through?
Oh, yeah, we have criteria that we go through, affordability, styling.
Okay, so everybody's on the same page.
Yeah, no, yeah, we are, but we aren't.
But you've got your own opinion, right?
Yeah.
Right. Well, not only that, but we all look from a different standpoint.
Exactly.
We've got people who are total gearheads. We've got people like me who are just regular guys who get to drive these vehicles. We have people who look at it from another standpoint. So we all vote, and it comes together as a consensus. So it's kind of a cool way of doing it.
Last year's car of the year, and most people have forgotten this by now, is the Hyundai Elantra. The truck of the year, no surprise, was the F-150. And the utility vehicle of the year, this did make a lot of news, and I know you reported on this. It was the Ford Mustang Mach-E, which we mocked the Mach-E on the show, saying we didn't like the marketing of this. We all thought unanimously Ford should have called this something other than a Mustang. And I would think right now, it probably doesn't matter because the thing's been out a year. But just from your perspective, what do we know about the sales of the Mach-E, Jeff, overall?
Well, like any new product, it's sold out for the year. Yeah, but anyhow, getting back to the Mustang Mach-E, I actually was the one who got to announce that last year. We did it as a webcast because of COVID, and I had never done this before, so I opened the envelope, and nobody knows but the people in Deloitte. Then when I opened it, I looked at it, and I had one of those, I don't want to have a Steve Harvey moment. It had all three nominees there. And the first thing I saw was the three nominees. And I was like, okay, who's the winner? And further notice who the winner was. So I had this, it was only like 2 seconds, but it felt like 2 hours going, okay, I would rather pause than say the wrong thing.
Yeah, that's so aptly put. Nobody wants to repeat a Steve Harvey moment. You're absolutely right.
But anyhow, about the vehicle, you can argue for, you can argue against, but Ford has gotten a lot of publicity for this vehicle. They said earlier they were going to do something that was an electric version of the Escape, but they decided that to make a splash, they had to do something more exciting. So it's a great vehicle, whether you call it a Mustang, people who are Mustang purists probably don't like it, but the reality is they're not the people who are going to buy this car. So it's created a lot of buzz for Ford's first major mainstream EV. So it's done what they've wanted it to do.
I'll tell you, as far as Grand Rapids go, the Mustang Mach-E, or whatever they call it, is becoming like Tesla was 4 years ago, where you see a couple, and then 2 months later you see a whole bunch more, and then you see a whole bunch more. And I'm a car guy. I'm in the neighborhood I'm in. I see what's going on down there, and their popularity as they become available and people are buying them is going through the roof. I mean, where we used to see there was a blue one and a white one. Now there's like 15 or 18 of them that we see every day that are out there driving around. So it must be working.
Yeah. Well, it was the first EV that I've ever driven that I could see myself owning.
Really?
So, not
Get gifty this season at Bloomies, a first of its kind, highly edited new concept store in the Mosaic District. You'll find all the best names in fashion for men and women, like Balenciaga, Givenchy, ALC, Ganni, Golden Goose Deluxe brand, On Running, and so many more. Just in time to wrap up your holiday shopping and treat yourself to something incredible. Plus, mention this ad and receive a special gift next time you stop by. See you soon at Bloomies. Offer valid 1 per customer while supplies last.
Just the electric part, but I just liked it as a vehicle. The way the interior was laid out, the fact that it had a decent amount of cargo room, the fact that inside it looked techie without looking like a science experiment. I thought they really put the vehicle together nicely. I don't know personally if I could buy an EV yet, because I still can't quite get over the range anxiety issues that other people have, but it does have a ton of range. And as I said to one other person, because I thought of this, really went through my head on this. If you're somebody who is a first adopter and you really want to have something before anybody else, and you're willing to put up with some inconveniences, you're the kind of person who should buy an EV. If you want all the comfort you can get and all the convenience you can get and the least amount of risk you can get, then an EV probably isn't right for you. So that
Well
probably,
spoken.
probably
well
pretty
spoken.
much separate.
You know what always cracked me up? I look at my clientele, and there was a point in time where I think Jennifer Granholm was our governor, and she bought a whole fleet of flex fuel vehicles. And there was when we were doing the radio show, we interviewed this couple that owned a gas station not far from downtown Lansing, and the deal was if you got a Michigan State pool car, you were to go to this gas station and put E85 in it. And we all know about E85. It's got to be 1/3 the cost of gas to make it worthwhile and everything else. And this, we were looking at prices around the country, and I called this gal up and I'm like, why are you twice as much as everybody else? She goes, I've got all this expense. She probably won't get reelected, and then I have to eat it. So we're charging enough to make this work. And time goes on. The E85 thing's kind of, falling onto other things. I've got a lot of clients that live in Grand Rapids and work in Lansing for the state, and they all bought Priuses. And a Prius shines driving around town when you're in the electric mode in that. It's got a 1.1 liter little engine that works really hard to drive at 80 miles an hour down 96 to go to Lansing, but they all bought them. And it's just like the application is all wrong. And I think people are confused about what a hybrid or an electric car, all they look at is range. They don't look at their driving style and what it is that they should own. I think everybody should have like an Explorer or a Tahoe, and they should have an electric vehicle. And between the two of them, if they split the driving chores up, that would be perfect in today's world.
Yeah, I mean, it's important. What's the mission? What are you doing with your life? How do you live? If you take a look, if you're going back and forth between Grand Rapids and Lansing all of the time, it probably makes sense just to have an economy car.
Exactly.
And not to worry about whether it also has an electric powertrain. And this is one of the debates between different car makers. GM feels that hybrids, fuel cells, anything like that, those are transitional technologies. Skip them and go right to EVs. Toyota, on the other hand, which has invested a lot in hybrids, feels there is still a lot of bang for the buck in hybrids. So a lot of it is, what is your company invested in? If you're Toyota and you've spent billions of dollars to develop hybrids, you don't want this technology to go on the scrap heap. If you're GM and you don't have hybrids that are really competitive with Toyotas, well, why spend all the money to develop that technology? Spend all your money to develop electric vehicles. So that's why you hear different companies preaching different philosophies.
It's been a long time, I don't know, several years since I've went. We used to have the Society of Automotive Engineers had their yearly thing in Detroit. And there were people playing with hybrids back in the Bush administration. And I've heard talk that maybe that hasn't been totally given up on, and maybe not. What do you know about that?
Hybrids are still
I'm sorry, not hybrids, hydrogen.
Oh, hydrogen?
Hydrogen fuel cells. I know Nissan was big on it. Honda played with it. Toyota played with it. There's some domestic manufacturers that were into it, and it was a big deal umpteen years ago. And then I've heard that maybe it hasn't all been forgotten, that maybe there's still some people working on that.
Well, in the mass transit of Grand Rapids, the Rapid, they're all hydrogen powered vehicles.
Now, are they hydrogen internal combustion or fuel cell?
They're internal combustion.
I believe they'd be internal combustion.
Yeah, big difference between the two.
Yeah, but a couple of big caveats here. First, we used to joke that for roughly 20 years, hydrogen fuel cells have been 5 years away. It's been a technology that has been developed. Pre-bankruptcy, GM was extraordinarily high on it, but they've soured on it. Toyota has a fuel cell vehicle called the Mirai. GM had a bunch of Chevy Equinoxes that were test vehicles. Let's see, Hyundai is another company that is really into fuel cells, but the reality is a battery-powered EV has fewer moving parts. A fuel cell is an electric vehicle that generates the electricity on board. So if you can get the range of batteries up, you don't necessarily need to do it on board, and you can do a battery EV for less expense. Where we're seeing the focus on fuel cells now is bigger vehicles like 18-wheelers, things of that nature, which have places where they can be refueled by hydrogen, because we're not going to have a hydrogen fuel cell on a fueling station on every corner, but a truck depot can have a hydrogen fueling station, and a big truck would need immense batteries to be pure EV, but generating the electricity on board with hydrogen makes more sense. But where it will end up, I don't know. But the general thought is commercial vehicles, bigger things, maybe future buses. And people have been playing around with burning hydrogen in internal combustion engines, which I guess is what Grand Rapids is doing.
Yeah. I read a book one time about the turn of the century. And at the turn of the century, we had electric cars, we had steam cars, we had gasoline cars, we had everything going on. And everybody was scared of hydrogen because of the Hindenburg.
Yeah, but imagine if the Hindenburg was filled with gasoline.
Exactly. And that's what this book said. It's like gasoline drops to the ground and it burns. Hydrogen goes up in the air and nobody gets burnt. And they said it just, all the conspiracy theories of Harvey Firestone and Henry Ford and all those people and, how it all worked out. But they thought it was a reality. But at the end of the day, the high pressure of the hydrogen in a fuel cell vehicle, even though it's cool as can be, and maybe we'll get there someday, but I think electrics are coming first because they've just put more effort into the batteries.
Yeah, and there have been so many breakthroughs with batteries, and let's not forget, car companies like the idea of electric vehicles because they're simpler. They don't need transmissions. They don't need a lot of the equipment that tends to break down. And once they can get the cost of batteries down, it actually is far easier for a car maker to make an EV. And essentially, they're all planning like 3 different platforms: small, medium, large, and extra large, and putting different top hats, as they say, on top of them. So, they're simpler to develop. So long run, if they can get people to buy them, they're a lot better for the car companies.
Jeff Gilbert, CBS News Radio. We got to let you go, but I want to ask you real quickly on the North American Car and Truck of the Year Award. You are one of the 50 professional journalists who will be voting on that. I know the Lucid Air raised a lot of eyebrows when that became Motor Trend's Car of the Year. Will that automatically become one of your finalists? How do you choose, and what can you tell us right now before we let you go?
Yeah, the finalists have already been chosen. So for Car of the Year, it's the Lucid Air, the Volkswagen GTI, and the new Honda Civic. Those are the 3 finalists there. For SUV of the Year, Utility of the Year, it is the Ford Bronco, the Hyundai Ioniq, an EV, and the Genesis GV70. That's Hyundai's high-end brand. And Truck of the Year, it's the Maverick from Ford, the Hyundai Santa Cruz, which is Hyundai's small truck. And
I just saw one of those today. That's crazy.
Yeah, and Rivian, which is another EV startup, their R1T. So those are the finalists. We're going to vote again. And as I said, the winners, none of us know the winners until we're handed the envelope. So the winners will be announced in early January.
All right. That's very exciting. And the website, by the way, if you want to learn more, is NorthAmericanCarOfTheYear.org, NorthAmericanCarOfTheYear.org. Jeff Gilbert, CBS News Radio auto analyst. You are always very generous with your time and incredibly knowledgeable on something we love to talk about, which is everything automotive, the automotive industry. Thank you for your time, and thank you for joining us.
Remember, I want your job, and I'll pay you 50% to make for a nice retirement.
Ooh, okay. I think we got some off-air negotiation.
Talk to the wife. Let's think about this. Thanks, Jeff. We really appreciate it. Good talking to you.
Thanks for having me. Yep.
Yeah, Jeff, have a great night, and thank you for joining us. He is always knowledgeable, and he has one of those jobs, guys, like we talked about. Anything new that comes out, he's driven it, and he knows a lot about it. In fact, he is on assignment covering a new vehicle, which, as he told me before we started tonight's episode, he is embargoed to talk about. So we can't. Nothing will be spoken until that comes out, and you'll hear more about that.
The top ones, the three, the truck of the year, they, like the Maverick, I forget the other two that he said, they were smaller. I get that kind of is the way things are going. Everybody's, not wanting like a full size, but I don't know. I guess
But don't you think those are established? The Ram, the Silverado, the F-150, those are kind of established. And
go ahead, Jeff. You were going to say something.
Go ahead.
What's eligible is what's new this year. So it.
Gotcha.
All right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe that was.
That's good. That's great to know. Actually,
that's a little.
If it's something that's new. Yeah,
it has to be a vehicle that debuts or is significantly redone for that model year.
Gotcha.
So
so all those you mentioned are definitely that way.
Right. That's how the F-150 won last year, but it's not eligible this year. Same thing.
Okay.
Yep.
We appreciate it, Jeff, and thank you. And we will certainly be in touch again in the future. Jeff Gilbert, CBS News Radio, joining us. And guys, we went a little longer than usual, but we covered a lot of ground. Anything else you need to add, Mr. Schwinkendorf?
I just think that, eons ago, back in the radio show days, we used to contact a dealer and do like the car of the week or the car of the month. We did it like every 3-4 weeks, and one of us would go down to the dealership and actually get the lowdown on what the new vehicle is and go for a test drive and do all that kind of stuff. I think we ought to bring that back to the podcast because there's so many different things coming out today. I drove down 28th Street to pick up some parts, and at the Hyundai Kia dealership, there was what he just talked about. I don't know what it is. It's like how, John, what's the Honda that's Ridgeline?
Ridgeline.
It's like a Kia version of a Honda Ridgeline, which is right in line to compete with the Ford Maverick and all that kind of stuff. And there were Mavericks at SEMA that were lowered, and you can get hybrids and all this kind of stuff. We need to go out there and spend a little time checking out this new stuff and go doing it. I think it'd be great for the podcast. So if people out there if they think that that's something they might like, they should go to our Facebook page and let us know.
Yeah, it's the Hyundai Santa Cruz, by the way, and it is
there you go.
It is a radical looking vehicle, and they're going to sell.
It's like a crew cab version of the old Subaru Baja, which was a little pickup.
It almost has, if somebody could take an El Camino and really
jack it up a little.
Jack it up and make the bed a lot shorter. It's got that kind of vibe. It's got a very aggressive profile. The wheels are massive on it, and they are going to sell a ton of these things, depending on how they're priced, which I got to think they're going to be, it says somewhere in the $35,000 to $45,000 range. I got to believe that's a little low though for that vehicle. So
it always is.
Yeah.
They tell you you can go buy it.
What the stock tires come at, or like the one you see.
But they're not even available. That base one that they put in they used to put in the Sunday newspaper for $15,995. They had one. Every other one was $30,000. That's just the way it is.
Yeah, and I don't even know in terms of the sales on the Maverick. Jeff's talking about how they're basing this on demand. I have no idea what kind of demand they're having for the Maverick now that you've got, of course, the F-150, now the F-150 electric coming out. I think Ford has got a challenge on its hands with that too.
The Edmunds article that I read, they said that while demand was down so low, in my lifetime, I look at Chrysler. Lee Iacocca came in, Chrysler brought Jeep saved Chrysler. Then the minivan, they did the Omni and the Horizon. That saved Chrysler before they even bought Jeep. It was new and different, little 4-cylinder front-wheel drive cars. And then they did the minivan thing, and everybody's done that. And John and I know from our customers, they drove minivans when they had kids and they had to go to soccer practice and stuff like that. And when the kids go away, they go, that's not very sexy. So they all go out and they get a little sports car, some 2-seater, little low thing. And it's Michigan, and it's fine until December. And they go, that thing sucks. So they go back, they go and buy an SUV, and they go, I love my Grand Cherokee, but it gets really crappy gas mileage. And so 2 years later, they go back to a minivan because they want to pick up their friends and go out to dinner, and they're not sexy, but they work. And Ford's whole thing is that dad can have his pickup truck and mom can have her minivan, and it's got 4 doors and they can seat 5 people. And that's where the Maverick's going. And I bet you that there's people going to buy those, and it's going to work out.
By the way, Mr. Puick, you know why they're selling these? The sticker price on the Maverick X, this is the XLT at 2022. $23,775. That's the cash sticker price. That's without promotions. And that's
You also know
unbelievably
when I bought
affordable.
My first Ford trucks in the 80s, and XLT was the top of the line. Now it's like 2 steps from the bottom. They have, what is that? King Ranch,
Lariat.
Platinum, black.
Lariat, golden, blah, 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 blah. So,
There's a platinum
when you
version
get that
too.
Auto Trader, and you
Yep.
look, you can go buy a new F-350 crew cab dually 4-wheel drive for only $90,000. You're just like, oh my God, are you kidding me? Now
Yeah.
I feel, you ever see those commercials on TV about the guy people who bought their first house and are turning into their parents?
Yeah. Yep.
You know,
Yeah, there you go.
When
That's
do you
us.
think this is going to board and all that kind of stuff? That is what car buying is today. It's like $90,000. Are you kidding me? I personally have bought homes, which makes me feel really old and really bad, but it's the truth. 90 grand. People finance these things for 10 years.
And it's going to get longer as well, too.
Crazy.
What a note. We will wrap up this episode number 35, one of our longer episodes to boot, but that's great. Leave a comment for us on our Facebook page. You can review our podcast on Apple Podcast or Spotify Podcast. We are now on Spotify, which is a big deal. And of course, you can
Awesome.
You can tell Alexa to play Michigan's Auto Talk podcast, and it will do it. It's as simple as that. So we're just about anywhere. We're nationwide and growing. So until then, by the way, guys, I need to let you know some breaking news for our listeners. AJ has invited us to come to Garage Kept Motors in January to do a show.
Sounds good.
We will
definitely.
We are all in, and we're working on that trip to Hickory Corners as well for Gilmore Car Museum. So we've got some fun stuff planned.
Podcast on the road, man.
Yep, podcast is going to hit the road, and not only that, we've got the Michigan International Auto Show at DeVos Place, which we're gonna be there. We're gonna find a way to come in through the back door and not tell anybody we're there, but we will be there for sure.
How cool would that be?
That would be really cool. And you want to talk
A little
about
down low incognito spy thing?
Yeah, we'll just set up like in between a couple of big SUVs. Nobody will know we're there. It'd be pretty simple.
Nice.
That puts the wraps on episode 35. I'm producer Phil Tower. Thank you for listening.
I'm Al Schwinkendorf.
I'm John Pua. Have a good one.
Get gifty this season at Bloomies, a first-of-its-kind, highly edited new concept store in the Mosaic District. You'll find all the best names in fashion for men and women, like Balenciaga, Givenchy, ALC, Ganni, Golden Goose Deluxe brand, On Running, and so many more. Just in time to wrap up your holiday shopping and treat yourself to something incredible. Plus, mention this ad and receive a special gift next time you stop by. See you soon at Bloomies. Offer valid 1 per customer while supplies last.